is Ardra Cole, and I'm a professor at Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I'm also the founder of a national charity called Elder Dog Canada. And it's hard to know where to begin to tell a life story, but I'll probably start with a little bit of background. So growing up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, I came from a working class family, and university wasn't a big part of our lives. Education was important, but certainly it wasn't a big part of our lives. And I just kept going and going. And my father used to say that I was a slow learner because I was always in university. But I was also always really, I always kind of went against the grain in many ways. You know, I was kind of a nonconformist. So it was always a but. I would, do something, but it would be a little different. Another really interesting opportunity opened up in the area of a resource teacher for girls who were committed to juvenile detention facility. So I became the special education resource person there, moved back, stayed there for a while, and really enjoyed that role, but also realized perhaps my biggest learning there was how much social position and opportunities really matter and contribute to which path you end up being on. And as I said, I was, part of a working class family. We didn't have much, but I had a good, secure home, and I had parents who, especially my mother, who gave me really good guidance. And but I was a typical kid, and I was out doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. But I kept thinking every girl who came into the school, I recognized as someone who was there because of her circumstances. That if it weren't for the difference between us being someone who, had someone to look out for them, I would have been there myself. They weren't doing anything that I didn't do, but they were just in unfortunate circumstances. I left that job and went to Toronto, where I did first another master's degree, and then a doctoral degree in educational psychology. I was at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto for 25 plus years. Contrary to public opinion about what the life of a professor is, it's incredibly hard, demanding work with no life balance. It's a privilege, an absolute privilege, to be in that role, to teach students, adults in my case, who are interested in making a difference in whatever profession they're in. It's a privilege to do research and to write and to make that work accessible, to contribute to knowledge advancement, whatever that means. All of those things I loved every minute, and they're absolute privileges. I thought very naively that one way of restoring some balance in my life was to welcome a four-legged friend. So I decided that a dog was going to be the answer, and that dog was going to tear me away from my work and my desk, and going to help me become a little bit more balanced. So I met Tattoo, and Tattoo came into my life as a 9-month-old dog, puppy. And as I mentioned, completely changed my life. I fell head over heels so deeply in love with this dog that I couldn't stop thinking about him. It was real love. It was genuine love. I couldn't stop thinking about this dog and the impact that he was making on my life. And I also recognized that if he was having such an impact on me, then what could he do for others? Tattoo and I became volunteers with an organization called Therapeutic Paws of Canada. Every week for many years, Tattoo and I would visit a long-term care facility in Toronto. And my role, of course, was to just accompany him. I had no other role. I was kind of invisible for the most part. So what that did was give me a really a lot of time and opportunity to watch. And of course, as a researcher, I spent a lot of time watching and wondering. And so one of the things that I observed was that Tattoo had a special talent and preference, really, to be with people at end of life. We became regular visitors in palliative care. And I still get chills when I think of what Tattoo was able to do. And here are people at such a difficult time in their lives, coming to the end of life. And we would walk into that room. In some way, Tattoo would know exactly what to do, whether that was going close to a bed so that somebody could kind of reach out and pet him. The most profound moments, most poignant moments for me were when someone obviously needed to be close to Tattoo, but they were bedridden. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to, because Tattoo was not a small dog. So, what am I going to do? Well, by the time I spend thinking about how to solve this problem, Tattoo had jumped up over the rails of the bed and, scooted up alongside and was already lying beside someone. And he would lie there in perfect quiet while, this person would close her eyes and stroke his fur. And it was just such a privilege to be part of moments like that. So it really opened my eyes to the important role that dogs play, not only in, the life and lives of people who are well, like me. I mean, he was so important in my life and well-being, but also to people at other critical times in life. And so I thought, okay, this is a really important thing to do and to better understand. And the other interesting part of it was that doing this, every week, we would walk into that building and into that unit, and I would watch Tattoo at work, and everything else that I did in life seemed insignificant, because he and whatever he was doing at that time put it all into perspective. This is what really mattered. And so that was a moment for me where I realized, okay, you can do something that is beyond this one person and one dog. So that was a really defining moment. And I thought about, the importance of our research making a difference. So, we have this Tattoo experience needing to make a difference in a broader way. And we have, caregiving and Alzheimer's disease and the role of dogs, the need to make a difference in an important way. And, here I am, a university professor. It's one thing to, do research and to write and to talk with other people in your community. It's quite another to move that work out into community to make a difference in other people's lives. That became an important part of what I want it to do, where we are. The third thing that happened on a personal note is that a phone call, the dreaded phone call one day, that my older brother had died of a heart attack. His dog was with him when he died. And his dog, whose name is Mr. Brown, he was a chocolate lab, and he was old. He was a senior dog, 10 and a half at the time, and he had terminal cancer. And what's going to happen to Mr. Brown? I think he should come and live with me. So Mr. Brown joined my family. He taught me a lot about old dogs and what we can learn from them, and how they get along in the world, and how they deserve to be, I guess, to be honored for the rest of their lives in much the same way as humans need to be honored. I started to think about, Mr. Brown and older dogs, and set that alongside, senior people for whom dogs were such an important part of their health and well-being, and my experience with tattoo, with people at end of life. And those three things just lined up and stared at me. And I thought, Ardra, here is what you need to do. And so it was kind of a moment when I thought, nothing else matters in my life right now except focusing the rest of my life on supporting the relationship between older people and older dogs. And so I'd say within, I don't know, it was kind of one of those moments where it just happened. But I decided that I was going to dedicate my life to this. And I created a national charity called Elder Dog Canada. And so the more I said the name, and started to think about what that might be, I realized that this was all that mattered to me. While all of this was happening, I got the job and was planning to move and was going to put the house up for sale, and I had a diagnosis of cancer. So I thought, this is really a cruel, something very cruel message. What does this mean? And so I thought, well, what it means is get your priorities straight. So it was interesting how, coming back from the clinic where that diagnosis happened, it was a very weird experience. Because, when you have a diagnosis like that, it's surreal. And you think, okay, well, what do I do now? Where do I go, right? And so I wasn't driving, fortunately. It was a good thing for everyone involved that I wasn't driving. But it was a long drive home, and we were on the road. And I remember sitting in the passenger seat of the car, and it was as vivid as if it were real. My life kept flashing, what's important, what's important, what's important. And it was as if everything kind of was presenting itself and then moving aside, presenting itself and moving aside. And the only thing that mattered and stayed with me from all of that was Elder Dog. And that for me was the message. It wasn't just, okay, you had this really interesting idea, and yeah, you always have, big ideas. But, this was the message that this was more than a big idea. This was something that was really worth it. And in fact, this was the only thing that really mattered. So Elder Dog started in 2012. I conceptualized it 2009, and it took a few years to get it off the ground and to move and to start. So we started our first chapter in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. A couple of volunteers who really shared the passion and the vision. And Elder Dog was really about helping senior people keep their dogs at home as long as possible by, helping with their dog care and supporting rehoming of older dogs who lose their companions. And so that start in 2012 with one chapter, we call them pods, has grown now. We're now in 10 provinces. We are across the country. We have well over 1,000 volunteers carrying out the work of Elder Dog. It's so back to my earlier comment about the scales tipping. I'm still working full-time at the university, and then there's Elder Dog, my heart, and the work that I think is the most important thing I've ever done in my life. So the privilege of being at a university is kind of surfacing once again, because what I'm able to do is focus my research on the role of dogs in seniors' lives. So it's just this wonderful integration of making a difference in the community in a way that I know really matters, and being able to, research that, understand that in an in-depth way, and provide some kind of, I quotes, legitimacy to this, the importance of supporting that relationship. So that's where we are today. That, the difference between my experience and their experience was our location, for lack of a better word. And, to me, that's all about the importance of advocacy, right? And that's a thread that carries through right up to the present. Advocacy is number one. And whether you're advocating for, a young girl who just happened to get into some trouble because of, what she did or didn't have, and, where she was and so on, or you're advocating for, an older adult who is living in dire circumstances, who is isolated, and whose only companion, only support has 4 legs. It's all about advocacy and making or creating the awareness of how important that is, because everyone needs advocates, but there are some people who don't have any. And so, there are those of us who can step up and be advocates for others. And, it's interesting, through Elder Dog in particular, and then of course, I kind of pick up on that through my research, and I can dig into it in a different way. There's a lot of talk about positive aging, and there's a lot of talk about social isolation, and loneliness. Yet a lot of that talk is not about how dogs can really work to counter a lot of the isolation, the loneliness, and how, if age-friendly communities and if positive aging included thinking about what older adults might need in order for them to be able to keep their dogs with them, the world would be a different place. And so there's another whole level of advocacy, but it is important that, the point you make about, the connection between the practice of providing help and assistance and understanding that from a research perspective, that is so important, because we live in a world that is reliant on credentials and legitimacy and so on and so forth. So we need to make those points strong and in a particular way that are storied, because story is powerful. You know that better than anyone. But they need to be understood not only as isolated incidents, but in a more of a collective. And it's, when I think about how many of the senior people in our society are having to live, the conditions, they're no different than those girls at school. And I think that's something that we all need to, to think hard about and do something about. Yeah.